Hi y'all, it's Barbara from Divine Creative Love. Today we're doing something a little different than my normal Bible journaling videos. I'm going to show you how to get started with mixed media faith journaling. I'll share the journal I use as well as which supplies I recommend, and then we'll create a journaling page together. Let's dive in. So first let me show you the journal that I use. I looked at several different ones before I settled on this one. And it's a nice mixed media sketchbook with 156 pages front and back, or 78 sheets of paper. It's got that nice elastic strap and a nice hard cover. And then the paper is really nice and thick, so you can journal on both sides of the paper without anything showing through. And it's a pretty bright white paper too. And each page is perforated, so you can remove the pages if you want. So it's got just that perforation on the edge of each page. I haven't removed any of mine, but it's an option. And then it comes with this nice page protector that you can put behind the page that you're working on, and then the bookmark is a nice feature too. So those are all the things that I like about this journal, and I'll link to it in the description below so you can find it easily. But before I show you what I've done in the journal, we talk about supplies. So you can use pretty much anything in these mixed media journals. I've used paint, ink, you can use paint markers, pens, pencils, like pretty much anything. The paper is so thick, it can handle pretty much anything. But the paint markers come especially in handy for writing, and I'll show you why a little bit later in the video. But I've got the white and the gold and some colors, and I wish I had some black. I'm thinking about getting black paint markers too, and I'll tell you why later in the video. But paint, like acrylic paint, is a really good option. It's pretty cheap, and it's so easy to use in this journal. Because again, the paper is so thick, and paint's just fun. I like it because you can finger paint or you can paint with a brush. It's just fun. But like I said, you can use pretty much anything in these journals. So next, I want to show you some examples of pages that I've created so far. So this was my first one, just like ink and stamps in the background, and then I had that list of things that I wanted to remember. And I started this journaling about a little over a year ago and really fell in love with it, but I haven't always had time for it, so I don't have that many pages in the journal. But you can see how awesome that paper is. Like nothing showed through from the first page that I did to the next one, and you can see how simple this page was. All I did was finger paint each petal of that flower in a different color of acrylic paint, and then I filled in the background with some stamps. And then each petal of the flower has different blessings that I wanted to thank God for. And it's just so therapeutic to write everything down and see how many blessings I have to count. And the same thing with this page. It was so simple. I just smeared a bunch of black paint all over the page and then used these stamps in gold ink. And it's so simple, but I love how that gold just pops against the black. And these next two pages are even simpler. So this one, Psalm 51:17, was really speaking to me. So I just used some calligraphy markers to write "Be broken, not bitter" at the top of the page, and just used the heart stamp, and then wrote out the verse. So that's really simple and easy. And then this one, I literally just spread paint on my hand and put my handprint in several different colors. And then I wanted to write some negative emotions off to the left, and then the counteracting those with positive things in my life. So you can see it can be really easy to do these mixed media pages. This one was just stamps, and then this one I did that rainbow in Inktense pencils, and then the little chapel was a stamp, and the clouds were stamps too. And then this last page that I've made is most recent. Just a few weeks ago, I came home from work and I was really stressed out, and I just wanted to put some paint down on the page. I just kind of smeared a few different colors, and then did a stencil and some stamps, and then I put this list of reasons to not give up hope in the middle of the page with all the different Bible verses and promises of God that I wanted to remember. And then there's still room for more too. The only thing that I wish I had done differently with that page is I discovered that these Mr. Pen or the Pigma Micron pens don't write very well on top of acrylic paint. So I actually had to write 2 or 3 times over each verse that I wrote down just to get it to show up. So I would not make that same mistake again. Paint markers would have been a better option. But then moving on to this page that I've just put a little bit of background on, and I'm going to show you how easy it is to add some more layers to it and turn it into a whole journaling page. So I literally just turned my ink pad upside down and stamped to get that cool texture. I just thought, I wonder what would happen if I just put the whole ink pad on the page. And then I used a little blender sponge to blend around the colors, and then added a little bit more ink and then some red also. And one of the things that I love about the mixed media faith journaling is that I don't always have to know what I'm going to do when I start a page. Sometimes I just, put down some paint, or in this case, turn the ink pad upside down, and I don't have to know right away what I'm going to use it for. And another thing that I did with this page is I spritzed some water on it and used the paper to absorb some of the ink. It didn't really create as much texture as I wanted, but ended up with that cool piece of paper that I'll use for something else later. So I'm going to speed up the video here. This process took me maybe about 45 minutes, and I'll show you how easy it is to just add some more paint or some more ink and create a really cool mixed media page that you can use to write down Bible verses or just whatever, prayers or anything that's on your mind or that you need to, kind of process in life. So the first thing I did was I took some acrylic paint and combined it with some glazing liquid to thin it out a little bit. And then I'm taking that same sponge and just using that pretty little stencil to add some swirls to the background. So I just placed it here and there and added a little bit of swirls in different parts of the page. And again, acrylic paint is just so much fun, especially in these really thick paper mixed media journals. It's not as easy to use acrylic paint in a journaling Bible just because of the thin paper, but here you have the freedom to use, like I said, pretty much anything. So if it's ever bothered you that journaling Bibles are harder to work in, like the thin paper bugs you, or even if you just don't feel comfortable like journaling directly in God's Word, the faith journaling like in a separate journal can be a really good alternative to that. I like it as a supplement to Bible journaling. Like if I'm not journaling on a specific verse, then this faith journal is a really great option if I want, to talk about a general topic or like reference a whole bunch of different verses or different passages. It's nice to have a outside journal that I use that's apart from the journaling Bibles. And the next thing that I did here is I wanted to add some stamps in the background. So these are Creative Worship background texture stamps. And it was actually Corin Sutherland, the owner of Creative Worship Stamps, that turned me on to this idea of faith journaling. Because early last year, I participated in one of her virtual retreats, and she did this one session on faith journaling, and I was totally intrigued, and that's what motivated me to go out and looking for a journal and get started myself. And you can see how that page is really starting to come to life with all the different textures and colors. We've got a little bit of like red and pink and light pink, and now the black and the script. So the next thing that I wanted to do is add some gold, and this one of the stamps in that background set was a little musical background. So I took my gold ink and I'm adding a little bit of the musical notes here and there. See, that really makes it pop with the gold. And as I've done more of this mixed media faith journaling, some of the things that I really enjoy about it is just that there's less pressure when you're creating kind of an abstract background. You're not really trying to make anything, like drawing something. It's just putting down different layers and seeing what works. And then if something doesn't work, you can always cover it up with something else. And, it's just so much less pressure than trying to draw something or, like, not that you can't draw anything if you want to, but I find it really enjoyable to create these backgrounds. And then, like I said, you don't even have to know what you're writing yet when you create a background. You can just create it, and then, God might inspire you with something that that He wants you to learn, or, something that you're going through that you want to write about. Now that gold ink is nice and dry, the last step before writing anything is going to be to cover up a little bit of the middle of the page to make room for the writing, which I know kind of seems counterproductive when I did all that pretty background work, but by adding the acrylic glazing liquid to the paint and thinning it out some, I made it a little bit transparent. So we're going to cover like part of the page, and you can still see kind of underneath it a little bit of the color that'll show through. So I really love that acrylic glazing liquid. I use that all the time to make the paint thinner, and so it's kind of semi-transparent. So you can see we're getting a little white in the middle of the page, but you can still see the pinks and the reds and even the blacks showing through. And as I was going over it with the brush, I kind of was trying to feather the edges a little bit, so it kind of like blends organically into the pinks and reds, the border that's around the edges. And it's starting to look really cool. Like, it almost looks like a kind of washed out, like, vintage artwork or something. It just looks really cool. And I could have even used more of the glazing liquid to make it more transparent. Like, if I could have a do-over, I would make it a little bit more transparent than I did, but it still looks really cool. Or a different way to do this would have been to just cover up the middle of the page with a piece of scrap paper and just paint all around it, and then you could remove the scrap paper and already have like an empty space in the middle of the page for writing. So you could do it that way. And then I've got this list of verses about how to love others, because this is something that I've been wanting to do for a while, to make a list of the different verses that really get into the nitty-gritty of how to love others, the different qualities and behaviors that we need to adopt in doing that. And I started out with this gold paint pen, but I discovered pretty quickly that the gold doesn't show up as well as I had hoped it would. So I went ahead and wrote the first verse, which is Romans chapter 12, verses 9 through 10. Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. And I don't know about you, but that last part really speaks to me. Honor one another above yourselves. That is definitely something that I need to improve on. And skipping ahead, since that gold didn't show up very well, I ended up going back over it with a micron pen, which worked out a lot better than trying to use a micron pen on top of the acrylic paint directly. It worked out a lot better on top of the gold paint pen, and it made it show up so much better. I really want to get a black paint marker to do the same thing, just, in one single step, because I really should have used black since the gold didn't show up very well. But, you live and you learn. There's definitely always something to be learned along our life journey and in journaling and creating and studying God's Word. So now let's slow it down a little bit and appreciate the finished page. With all that paint and ink that went into it, nothing showed through on the backside, which is really cool. The paper is just so thick in this mixed media journal, which I love. It makes it possible to just throw anything at it, and nothing has shown through on any of the pages that I've done. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this faith journaling video, be sure and hit the like button and subscribe to my channel too, so you won't miss any of my future videos. And we'll see you next time. Bye!